So, a while back I ended up covering Dexter's Laboratory Deesaster Strikes for the Gameboy Advance as one of the first games I ever took a look at on my channel since switching up my content to producing licensed video game reviews. A short while after that video had been released, I began deliberating on my current methods and schedule of game coverage and came to the conclusion that it probably makes more sense to cover one cartoon franchise in its entirety at a time rather than jumping back and forth all over the place, barring a few specific exceptions. But, of course, I had already covered Deesaster Strikes in a video, and for a good while there it was floating by its lonesome while all of the other Dexter's Lab video games kept passing by, waiting for when it was time to finally be covered. Well, that time is now. That's right, this time around we've got ourselves a triple header of Dexter's Lab video games ahead of us, as I'm going to be taking a look at not one, not two, but 3 of the remaining Dexter's Lab video games that I have yet to cover. Robot Rampage for the Game Boy Color, Science Ain't Fair for personal computers, and Chess Challenge for the Game Boy Advance. This video is likely going to be on the shorter side of things, seeing as these games are all relatively simple and quick to sum up, and to those wondering where the heck Mandark's lab is in all of this, that game is going to be discussed in my next video as a standalone subject, seeing as there is plenty I have to say about that game for it to have its own video dedicated to it. With that said, let's dive right into the first of these titles, as well as the first Cartoon Network video game ever made, period. Dexter's Lab Robot Rampage for the Game Boy Color. Now, I suppose starting right off the bat, I should probably acknowledge that Robot Rampage was developed by Ultron and released on November 14th, 2000. No, not Ultron, Ultron, with an A.
This feels wrong.
This game existed not only as a handheld title, but also as a sequel/reskin of the original Game Boy Color game, also developed by Ultron, known as Elevator Action EX, an already updated version of the classic Game Boy title simply named Elevator Action. Yep, despite Cartoon Network's first ever original cartoon having a successful launch that set a positive standard for all of the shows to come, the first ever video game was quite the opposite. But at the time, Elevator Action had its fair share of fans in the gaming scene, so this seemed like a rather welcome idea, I suppose, but this is like the equivalent of purchasing a downloadable cosmetic pack in today's market. Sure, the character sprites were changed to fit Dexter's Lab a bit more, but fundamentally it's the exact same experience repackaged and sold at full price under the guise of being a brand new game. As we'll see with the core gameplay, it basically consists of Dexter moving up and down a building via elevators and escalators while avoiding enemies, although Robot Rampage certainly put a bit of a Dexter's Lab spin on things. The plot of the game essentially boils down to Mandark reprogramming all of Dexter's robots, so Dexter has to run his lab, which for some reason is in the form of an office or apartment building. Yeah, try not to think about that. Unfortunately, due to this being a reskin, the setting wasn't as attuned to the lab aesthetic of the show as much as it could have been, but anyways, he has to run around his lab gathering the code necessary to reset his robots, and then you play through the whole game until the end where Mandark gets defeated and flees Dexter's lab. There's hardly a plot here at all that I can really get into, seeing as this is a Game Boy Color game. Like with the Powerpuff Girls Game Boy Color trilogy, the limited hardware capabilities at the time made it difficult to get its story across, and with this playing more like an arcade-styled game than something like an RPG, story isn't really a priority of the genre. Sure, after certain stages you get a brief interruption from Mandark, but it doesn't really amount to much. The core of the gameplay goes like this. If you start at the top of a building, you work your way down, and if you start at the bottom, you work your way up. Along the way, you need to enter doors with a chemistry flask on them, as those are the rooms that contain the code pieces you need to complete a level. The stage you are on will not conclude until you have collected all of the codes, which is conveniently located for you at the top center of your screen. You're given the number of objectives to acquire, and from there the game tosses you into the fray and leaves the rest up to you. There are also doors you can enter with a weapon icon on it, which will net you a different kind of weapon chosen by this roulette, which can either end with you getting a decently strong weapon, such as this rifle that seems to blast through all the enemies in a straight line, or the grenades, which absolutely suck ass. Honestly though, the default pistol weapon works fine enough on its own that it's not really worth the risk of trading it in for something inferior. I never found myself going to any of these doors because of that. Dexter has a pretty decent mobility with his duck and jump maneuvers, and he has a good running speed. The only instant kills in the game occur when you fall from a tall height or get crushed underneath an elevator, so as long as you're careful when around one, you should be okay. I didn't really find this game to be too difficult, at least until the final boss where you have to fight this beast of a killer robot which has way too much health and moves so fast that you probably don't stand a chance against it. Thankfully, the game gives you unlimited tries, but even still, this thing is really difficult to defeat. Eventually though, if you succeed, you take Mandark down and unlock the robot character as a playable hard mode version of the game where you can traverse through all of the game's levels all over again, although you're given a faster movement speed to give you an edge as a form of counterbalancing the increased difficulty. By default, the game conveniently provides you with 2 alternate skins for Dexter as well, both of which were featured in Season 1 episodes of the show, which was pretty cool. It's purely cosmetic, however, so don't expect any bonus abilities by choosing one of these outfits instead of his default lab coat, but the fact that it's even there in the first place is worth noting. And that's honestly about all I have to say about Robot Rampage. It's basically just a portable arcade title. I really don't care for the game and don't see any reason why I would ever return to this to play it again. It's not particularly fun, it's aged poorly, and other than the fact that it's the first ever Cartoon Network video game, it has nothing going for it. At the very least, it's not broken, it's not painfully slow, and the combat isn't clunky. Certainly felt better playing this than the Amulet of Time, that's for sure. It's an okay game for what it's trying to be, and on that front, it succeeds. I can't say much in terms of its faithfulness to Dexter's Lab, given that there are hardly any references to the show, and the setting doesn't really reflect Dexter's Lab particularly well the way Deesaster Strikes did, but that aside, it's just fine. Not a grand start to Cartoon Network's video game library, but it definitely could have been worse. Who published this game again? Ah, that explains it.
You are interrupting my very delicate calculations. Even I am amazed at the world of my laboratory.
Alright, before getting on to the second handheld Dexter's Lab game, I want to give a brief acknowledgement to Dexter's Lab's Science Ain't Fair, a PC game released in 2001 that I had no way of getting any footage of or playing, so I borrowed it from this channel on YouTube because they had uploaded high quality gameplay footage of it. The gist of the game is that it plays very similarly to how Mandark's Lab is designed in the sense that it is a glorified minigame collection comprised of simple point-and-click games such as guiding Dexter in his propeller hat suit without getting hit, or playing a variation of Tron against his sister Dee Dee. The game is broken up into a few different sections on the main lab hub screen, all of which contain their own sets of minigames that progress the player through each sequence. There doesn't appear to be any semblance of a story present here, it's literally just Dexter-themed minigames equivalent to the Flash games you could have found on Cartoon Network's website back when the show was actually airing. Rest in peace. There's not much else I can really say on this one though, seeing as I haven't experienced it for myself, but I at least wanted to acknowledge it briefly because otherwise I'd probably never get an opportunity to do so again. So yeah, that's Science Ain't Fair. But as for the last remaining Dexter's Lab handheld title, do you like chess? Because that's all this game is. Yep, it's chess. But not just any chess. This game is actually based on battle chess, a more extreme version of chess for only the most hardcore of gamers. Battle chess introduced this concept where whenever a player's piece takes out one of their opponent's pieces, the game would show a nifty animation of the corresponding piece taking it out for every possible combination of pieces. Chess Challenge takes the exact same concept and runs with it, and I find that a lot of these animations can be pretty cool and are very befitting of the character that's controlling them. The game comes with 4 potential teams to choose from. First of all, you obviously have Dexter and his various pieces in the form of his alternate ego trip selves, with his elderly self being his bishop while his scrawny teen self plays the rook. And of course, Monkey being the pawn is rather fitting too. The other 3 character sets to choose from include DD, Mandark, and Major Glory, all of whom have their own distinct chess pieces attuned to their characters and audible quips whenever something significant happens. That's the coolest thing about this game. The sheer fact that there are individual animations for every single possible piece across 4 different teams means a lot of sprite animation had to go into this to account for all of that. But then again, considering it's chess, which is a simple enough game to program, the game's budget had to go somewhere. All in all, I like them though. Some of them can be pretty humorous, and I love the fact that the game actually has voice clips included for each character voiced by their official voice actors from the show.
Versus Major Glory.
The game comes with a few different modes: tournament, quick game, multiplayer, and puzzle. Tournament mode obviously sees you working your way to the top as you take on the other 3 characters you do not choose to play as, while quick game is simply one round of chess. Seeing as this was a Game Boy Advance title, if you linked up your device with another Game Boy Advance and cartridge using the link cable, you could actually play your friend in a round of chess. I don't know how many people actually experienced this feature back in the day, given that I can't imagine this was a super popular game, but I'm sure somebody out there had to at some point in life. Even still, if this were an available option, I just don't see why the kids wouldn't play with actual chess pieces. I mean, isn't that part of the fun? Puzzle mode is probably the most enticing of the available options though, seeing as you are essentially given a board layout where you need to put the opposing piece into checkmate using a limited number of moves. It can be pretty addicting honestly, and is a cool addition besides the regular chess gameplay that you'd come to expect. Plus, once you end up clearing the whole thing, you can actually unlock hard mode. Although, I don't really think that mode is necessary because the AI in this game can be unapologetically brutal at points. There were games where it would absolutely wipe the floor with me, and while I admit I'm not an all-star chess player, certainly no Bobby Fischer, it still felt like even on easy difficulty, the game was unreasonably challenging to me when it shouldn't have been. At the end of the day though, this game is literally just chess, so I don't really know how else to expand on that. I guess I kinda wish the angle of the board was a bit more overhead because it would make judging the depth and seeing the position of some pieces a lot easier, especially if this game is being played on a microscopic Game Boy Advance screen, but that's about it. Otherwise, yeah, it's a fine Dexter's Lab chess game. Disappointingly, there aren't any references to the actual chess episode of the show, but that episode also hadn't aired yet since that was during season 4, so I can be a little forgiving. But yeah, that about does it for the 2 remaining handheld Dexter's Lab games as well as the PC title. Robot Rampage was a basic reskin of a pre-existing game, Science Ain't Fair was a simple point-and-click activity center, and Chess Challenge is certainly chess. Anyways, I have nothing more to say about any of these games. I wish they were as engaging as Deesaster Strikes was, but unfortunately none of them really seem to match that level of quality. As far as I'm concerned, Deesaster Strikes is still at the top. Next time though, hoo boy, are we in for a treat as Mandark's Lab is yet another distinct Dexter's Lab game unlike any of the titles I've discussed in this video, so be on the lookout for that. Until next time, Shadowstreak, signing off.